Hey, what's up, guys? This is Marseille, aka the Property Pastor, coming at you with another amazing real estate investing video. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the pros and cons of buying older houses as investment properties. Now, if you are looking at your first investment property, or maybe you've got a few under your belt and you're considering buying an older home, something built in the 50s or 40s, maybe even all the way back to the 20s or even the 1900s, this video is going to dig into some of the content, and it's going to dig into some of the pros and cons, rather, of these kind of houses. I have built my portfolio through some older houses, and I've had a few experiences, some good, some bad, but I want to just kind of share some of my experience with you guys if you're considering these kind of houses. I've done well with older properties, and I have 8 houses now. And most of my properties are multifamily. They're small multifamily properties. So I'm going to primarily be talking from my experience. But I think that some of those principles, they're going to relay even to single family homes. So we'll kind of look at it from my perspective and my experience. But my very first home was a quad. It was a quadplex here in my area, and this was in Newport News, Virginia. But it was a quadplex, and it was built in 1920. So in that purchase, right, it was my very first purchase. I bought it from a wholesaler, but in that purchase, up front, I had a lot of headaches. Some maintenance headaches, wood rot, asbestos was present. All these different types of things that I ran into. Fortunately, I had enough reserves, I had enough perseverance. But if I wasn't really expecting those things, and I really wasn't expecting those things, but they were great learning experiences. But I want to kind of just share some of that stuff with you guys so that you can be kind of prepared for it as we look into it. So before we get started, though, I want to remind you to make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Every single week we're bringing you great content. So please consider liking and subscribe, and also share this video with somebody who needs to hear it, somebody who's new to real estate investing, who may be thinking about buying an older house. So with that being said, let's dig into some of the pros and cons of buying this type of house. So the first thing that we want to look at on the positive side, one of the things I like, is that these kind of houses you can typically buy for a relatively inexpensive price point. So one thing about it, buying a house for a cheaper price point doesn't always mean that you're going to, just retire the next day. But these kind of houses can be purchased typically at very nice discounts. And the other thing about it is you get great cash flow. So when you have a low price point and you have great cash flow, that gives you a phenomenal cash on cash return. Now, in that, though, you're going to have some drawbacks, right? So with this, I'll give you the example of my first quadplex. So I bought it for $65,000, which in my area is not. That's what you would buy, a single family home for. So we're talking about a fourplex, and this had 1 bedroom, 1 bath units in it. And when I bought it, I think it was like around $1,700 that we were collecting in rent. But we've made some improvements. I actually employed the BRRRR process on vacant units, and went through it and put new vinyl siding, replaced windows, did some interior upgrades, some cosmetic upgrades, and today we're actually making about a little bit over $2,300 per month in collective rent. So we went from $1,700 to $2,300 at a $65K purchase price. Now, we did add money through BRRRRs, but the wonderful part about BRRRR is that all of our money was returned to us. So with that being said, right, this property, it presented a very efficient way to generate real good cash flow and a really good cash on cash return. So other piece about these kind of houses is a lot of times that the rents are comparable to newer houses, right? So a lot of times folks are, a house that's built in 1930, 1940, 1950 that has, modern appliances, that has a good cosmetic look to it. The tenant's not really looking at the age of the house or when it was actually purchased. So houses can get cosmetic facelifts and all that kind of stuff. But so we typically can get a comparable rent. The other thing that I think that's good about these kind of houses is that a lot of them have really good bones. What I mean by that is that their construction materials were very sturdy. So they were building, true stock. They were being built with true stock lumber. I mean, a 2x4 was a true 2x4, right? So if you go down to Lowe's, useless trivia, if you go down to Lowe's and you say, hey, I want a 2x4, and you measure it, it's not really 2x4, right? It's more like 1 5/8 by like 3.5, something like that. Maybe even 3 1/4. I can't remember exactly, but these houses were built with true lumber, right, which was sturdy wood, and that's why some of them, are still standing to this day. So houses like that had good bones. The other thing that's nice about them is that they don't make them like they used to, right? So sometimes you'll buy an older house and it's got carpet in it, and then you peel back the carpet and you find that there is these beautiful hardwood floors that can be restored. And even through that restoration process, now you got a beautiful home, right? A lot of them have tall ceilings in them. Folks today, they love tall ceilings. So some of these things, right? You can actually command a little bit higher rent if you restore these things to their former glory. Sometimes people will actually pay a bit of a premium for that type of house. So I have been kind of on the beneficial side of some of these things, but there's definitely some cons and some drawbacks to buying an older house, and let's dig into that a little bit. The very first thing, and this is one thing I want to make sure you're aware of, one of the things that you want to make sure you plan for, is that older houses tend to have higher maintenance costs, right? So one of the things that are typically prevalent that I run into is like the plumbing systems, for example. So sometimes older style houses actually had the drain pipes outside of the house, and I've got one house that's like that, and it's actually it's got cast iron pipe. So you look on the rear of the house, got this big cast iron pipe, on the rear of the house, and it goes down and under and to the sewer line and whatnot. But these type of plumbing systems, right, they get choked up, they collapse, right. I've had cast iron pipes collapse just from rust and all that kind of stuff. So you typically run into higher maintenance costs. My quadplex actually, fortunately in that event, it was it had been upgraded. They had been gutted out, and they replaced the cast iron pipe on that particular house with PVC. But in the first year of owning it, I mean, I had to call a plumber out there like at least 4 times, due to sewer line backups. And what was happening at the time, I'm thinking, the tenants, they're just being rebellious and they're just, doing anything and everything to just cause me headache. But what ended up being the root cause was literally a crack in the pipe. So I had to actually, after calling multiple times, I had to call a company with a special camera to snake down the line and kind of look around, and they were able to detect the source of the crack in the pipe that was causing me all the problems. So you're going to run into different maintenance costs that are going to be higher, right, with these types of properties. The other thing is that they typically have a lot of unknowns. So if you buy a property, you may find it advertised that says being sold as is, sellers to make no repairs, right? You typically are going to have some level of surprises. So the older the house is, a lot of times you're going to have more surprises, right? You may have termite damage. You may have wood rot from moisture, getting in the house over time. You may have floors that are unsettled. You may have foundation issues, right? You can have all sorts of things that you cannot see, and even your home inspection may not see. So you're going to have some unknowns with the older style house. The other thing is that if there was any rehab work, or if you're planning to do rehab work, a lot of times that work is not modular, right? So I mentioned earlier that the 2x4s are true 2x4s, and if you go and you try to match that up with stock 2x4s down from Lowe's, your walls aren't going to quite match up. So now you're doing furring out on walls that make things line up the way they're supposed to be. All of this kind of stuff can just create challenges. Walls typically are not always plumb. Not framing, but wall and room dimensions are not necessarily always square, right? So you get to the end of running your flooring, and instead of it being a true 90 degree, it's more like 84, that kind of thing, right? But a lot of times if you're doing rehab in an older house, it takes a little bit longer because your contractor can't just go and buy cabinets and they just fit, right? They buy cabinets and they're shimming and they're trying to get things to work that aren't don't normally work out, right? So the rehab work is not always modular. Things don't always fit quite right. So you have to be a lot more creative. You have to really kind of know what your contractor kind of has. They got to know what they're doing. The other thing is that the construction type can be a little bit of an issue sometimes with these older types of houses. Now, like I mentioned, the houses typically have good bones, But as you go back older and go back, earlier in the construction methods that were used back in the day, your framing could be like balloon framing. Now, what balloon framing is, basically, there's only, but let's say, for example, you got a 2-story house. If that house is framed with balloon framing, then between the first floor and the second floor, there's no separation between on the exterior walls. Right, so the exterior walls just have, instead of you having an 8-foot wall and then on top of it another 8-foot wall, basically there's 16-foot 2x4s, and in between them, right, there's just a cavity. Now, what that means is that you've got areas for drafting, as far as airflows go, which could be a fire hazard, right? If you get a fire on the first floor, it can spread very quickly to the second. If you get any kind of bugs, any kind of rodents, they got pretty much a clear path to go all the way up top. And these things can be kind of problematic. They're just things to kind of consider. One of the things I ran into was on my quad unit, it had balloon framing in it. And I was like, oh, cool. Well, I'm just going to open up the walls and put insulation in there. Well, I realized that if I put the insulation in there, it's just going to drop all the way down. With it. So, and if we did, spraying insulation, all that kind of stuff, we were thinking about doing, cutting holes in the walls and just spraying insulation in. Well, we had to do both floors, so we'd have to have 2 tenants kind of displaced at the same time. So I say all of that, but the framing type, can be, kind of different in that kind of house. The other pieces that the foundation is typically different in older homes. So a lot of foundations today are either going to be on a slab or a crawl space. In a crawl space type of construction, you have what they call a footer, right? And, in the slab, you typically have one too, but the whole house rests on a footer. But in these older homes, they use piers, right? And they didn't always have things sitting on concrete. And what happens over time is that things settle. So you start to get creaky floors. You start to get, big dips and humps throughout the house, right? So you can have foundation issues which can lead to walls cracking. It can lead to saggy floors, all sorts of challenges. The other piece is that the type of drywall that's used, back in the day, they used plaster and not drywall. So plaster, right, is they've got these, they call them slats, and then the plaster covers over the slats, and it's just extremely heavy. I've done demo on plaster walls before, and it's like concrete almost. Just what you're working with on these kind of older houses. The other piece, probably the bigger things that are usually more concerning to me. I don't really worry too much about the framing. I don't worry too much about the insulation, or even if they got plaster walls. The thing I think I worry about the most is the electrical system, in the plumbing system. But primarily on the electrical system, if the house has what they call the knob and tube type of breakers, or if it has aluminum wiring, or if it is non-grounded wiring, those typically are deal breakers for me. And the reason I say that is because many of those are fire hazards, right? So the fuse type of breakers aren't always as reliable. The aluminum type of wiring, that's a fire hazard. If the wiring itself doesn't have a ground connection, that's not quite as safe either. So the electrical is typically pretty concerning to me. And a lot of times when I go in an older house, my very first question is what kind of electrical is here. I'm looking at what kind of outlets they have. I want to see the breaker panel, and that's just before I offer on the house. That's not even at the inspection stage, right? So just kind of finding out really early and often. But you can have all of these issues on home. So if you're looking at you're looking at an old house, right, built in 1935, and it's got all of these things, and you're a brand new investor, your very first deal, and you're like, oh, cool, I can buy this house for $40,000. You got to go in with your eyes wide open and not your eyes wide shut, right? You just got to realize there are going to be issues, right? Those issues, if you're the kind of person that's like, hey, whatever it is, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to keep on trucking. This is the deal for me. Then great, that's fine, right? But if you're the kind of person that's like, hey, I need to hit a home run on my very first time out of the gate, and you run into these things, it could be a little bit daunting, and it could discourage you from moving forward. So, would I recommend a new investor, or would I recommend anyone buy an older house? I hate to say it, but it depends, right? And that's typically the answer, because I think it does depend. It depends on several factors, right? It depends on the amount of time that you have available, right? It's going to be hands-on up front. If you're buying an old older home, it's going to be a hands-on investment. That might not be your hands-on, but it might be your maintenance person, it might be your contractor. Somebody's going to have to go in there and get that place up to standard. They're going to have to deal with issues, right? Because I don't know about you, but for me, I'm not a slumlord. I try to put together a very nice product that people want to call home. So for me, an older house is going to take some time, right? The other piece that I tell people is that if you go into an older house, you might as well plan on a year before it's actually running. Operations are where you want them to be. So if you're expecting the cash flow from day one, or you're expecting to not have issues from day one, you're not probably not going to run into that scenario. That quad I was telling you about, the really old one, when I bought it, the first property I ever bought, it probably took a year before it became stable. But now it's my best performing property. So would I recommend people buy older homes? Absolutely. I think they're great investments. The other piece of it is, how much experience do you have? I mentioned several subjects. If you never heard of cast iron pipe, if you don't know the different framing styles, if you're not aware of foundation types, doesn't mean you can't be, right? If you have a growth mindset, these are just opportunities to learn, right? But if you have a fixed mindset and you're like, that's just way too much, I don't want that level, I don't want that smoke, Marseille. If that's you, maybe an older home might not be a good first investment. Maybe it's better for, door number 5, right? But I think, the amount of experience that you have is going to be important. So, and that's on the management side of the property, operations, dealing with maintenance issues, dealing with contractors. If you're doing a burr, I think an older house is great, right? I mean, because you're going to keep that house yourself. The refinance rules are much easier. You're not really necessarily trying to flip that house, so you don't have to deal with quite as much stuff. And granted, you still want to do things the right way. You still want to get permits and have licensed contractors, right? But the amount of hoops you got to jump through with an older house if you're going to burr is a lot less. The other piece of it is do you have reserves, right? So if you have no money saved up to deal with maintenance issues, an older home may not be a good first investment, right? So fortunately for me, my first investment, I had plenty of reserves set aside. So when I had to call a asbestos company to get asbestos removed, from the basement, $2,000, $2,500. When I had to, fix a leaky roof, right? That cost me money. And I was doing a burr and found out that a whole back wall was rotted out, right? Just more things, right? But if you have the reserves to handle it, then these are just things that need to be done, So that's what I would look at as well. So it really does depend. But if you do make the plunge, the biggest thing I can tell you is to do your homework, do your diligence, right? Due diligence is key in any kind of investment, but with an older house, I think it's even more important, right? So, I always look and ask, have any rehabs been done? Has the if it's that old, right? Does it still have the original, features in it? Does it still have the original wiring? Is the plumbing the original plumbing? Does it have asbestos in there? Does it have central heating and air? Or does it have baseboard heaters and window units? So all of those things, right? Do your homework, because those are going to either cost you money or they're going to make you money. The other piece is really important is termites, right? Because termites can be very, very problematic. Water damage is very problematic. So you want to get the moisture and termite inspection. Most of your lenders are going to make you get them anyway. But those things are going to tell you a lot about the state of the property, right? People can put a fresh coat of paint on stuff, and a fresh coat of paint makes stuff look fantastic. But you care about what's behind the walls, right? You really do. So make sure you do your homework with the termite. And I think the older the house, the more diligence you should do, right? When you get your home inspection, walk the property. When you get your inspection report back, read it line by line, and just ask yourself, how much does that take to fix? What are we looking at? Like here, when do I need to fix that item? If you've got, for example, in your plumbing, right? If you have galvanized pipe, at some point your water flow is going to go down. You're going to have, the breakdown of the pipe is going to end up in the drinking water. If you got cast iron drain systems, those are going to corrode out at some point. All of those things you have to consider, when buying an older property. But if you realize what you're working with, you realize what you're working on, you can have some really good deals in that property that's, 60, 70, sometimes even 100 years old. Right, it can be viable for another 50, another 100 years with the right upgrade. So, that being said, I do like older homes. That's how I started in real estate investing, and they've been good to me in my business. So, if you're considering an older house, or if some of the content today, you're not familiar with and you want to learn a little bit more about it, shoot me a question. Whatever I know, I'm want to share with you guys and help you along your journey. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. It has been my absolute honor and privilege to hang out with you today. Thanks again for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel and share this video with somebody else who needs to hear. God bless you guys. Love you so very much, and I'm praying for you and your family. Take care. This has been Marseille, the Property Pastor. God bless.